Hi everyone and welcome back. This is the presentation most of you have been waiting for from the very beginning, but we had to go through everything we went through to understand the terms and so that it doesn't sound like Chinese to you, and to basically have a less biased understanding as well, because if I had done this in the beginning, you probably would have focused only on your condition or what you think is your condition and maybe ignored other information if you deem it irrelevant to you. So I wanted you to go through everything and just get like a broad scope. And then today you'll be able to decide where you fit when it comes to the constitutions, and from there draft your meal plan and really know what's going on inside. Now, what is a body constitution? So basically, it's like your health profile. Everyone is different. So in modern terms, you might hear this as bioindividuality. And what it does is that it's like different categories that we fall into, but there's 9 of them. So it's not as simplistic as most mainstream and Western medicine terms. And what it allows is that it gives us common patterns for each constitution, which help to tailor remedies or to understand what's going on. And it's something that is usually intrinsic, but it can also change over time. So it will be affected by things like age. As we get older, we have different deficiencies, especially for menopause for women. It's also affected by our mental and emotional state. So you'll see that stress is the main factor that induces certain constitution issues, and also changes with diet. So like if you are long-term following a specific diet, you might develop some deficiencies or excesses if it wasn't the right one for you. And it's also affected by our environment and our daily activities, including work. As I said earlier, we have one main constitution, which will be the dominant one, but it is possible to have 2 constitutions that are taking over. There are also some common combinations, such as qi deficiency and dampness, or yin deficiency and damp heat, because heat is very young, so if there's too much heat, chances are there's not enough yin. And if there is any damp obstruction, then there will be a problem with your ability to relax, which is very yin. And we also have a very common pattern, which is qi stagnation with blood stagnation, because blood moves the qi. And in a way, qi also moves the blood. So it's all about how are things flowing internally. And you'll see later, maybe these don't make much sense to you right now, but in a couple of minutes they will. Starting with the first one is the healthy one, which is a state of neutrality, balance. You see two people happy, jumping around, they're energetically and emotionally stable, they have good appetite, generally good force, clear skin, like a nice complexion, regular bowel movements, also regular sleeping patterns. When there's a bit of challenge, they can adapt well, so there's some resilience. For example, changing weather, like they will not get sick when winter comes. And this is actually like the only difficult thing with this constitution is to maintain it on the long term. But of course, it's possible. Next, we have qi deficiency. So this is someone who is easily tired, feeling a bit meh. The voice will be a bit weak. It doesn't come out easily because it takes energy to talk. There could be sweating. There could be a weak immune system, so gets the flu quite easily throughout the year, and also takes a long time to recover from these illnesses. So of course, the first thing we want to tackle here is the spleen and avoiding damp foods, because if you remember, dampness prevents qi from moving in the body. So if there's a weak qi, you want to give it foods that are soothing, sweet, but not sugary. So you want to give root vegetables, mostly, and whole grains, cooked vegetables, things that are easy to digest. and also to generally keep warm and exercise regularly. And it's important to avoid harsh climates like a lot of wind, because that kind of strips away your energy, and to avoid anything that is too demanding. Next, we have the yang deficiency, which is someone who would always be cold and exhausted, like burnt out. So they will feel cold in their hands and their feet. They probably are pale or have a pale tongue, feels weak and tired, even when they wake up, even, or have a hard time waking up. And they also will probably have loose stools. Um, and it's possible that they are stuck in an eating cycle where there's a lot of raw food. And so you really want to avoid that and stick to warm foods, stick to sweet, like we said, with roots, meats, and whole grains. And also eat pungent foods that are going to warm the body, like ginger, garlic, and onion. On the other hand, we have yin deficiency. So this is someone who would either have a really hard time relaxing and sleeping, or someone who just feels very dried up. So one example would be someone who's going through menopause, or another example is just someone who is on like steroids. Not necessarily literally, but just someone who's like constantly doing, and is so much in the action. So what you would find here is warm feet and hands, a very short temper, possibly dry stools or constipation, would tend to be thirsty most of the time, and sometimes the thirst doesn't, it just seems to go through them, it doesn't really satisfy. Also could have a tendency to eat foods that are gonna make it worse, like maybe dry foods and very spicy foods, maybe also too much alcohol, so you really want to avoid that. And they would have issues in their stomach, in their throat, and as I said earlier, difficulty falling asleep. So this person would need to eat more yin foods, which are bitter, sour, and salty. Next is the phlegm dampness, and phlegm is basically a concentrated heaviness. It's seen in the form of mucus or fat. So these people will gain weight easily. They tend to store a lot of mucus, and it could be in the throat, in the nose, it could be a sinus issue. They also will be sweating a lot and will have problems with humid weather, especially. And they would have some tightness in the chest, congestion, always feeling heavy and tired, and tend to crave things that are sweet and greasy, so things that are damp, because it's a vicious cycle. And the way to get out of this is to eat more bitter foods, and to definitely avoid anything sweet and fatty, and to move regularly. Next up, we have damp heat, which is probably the best way to explain it is a pressure cooker. So imagine there's a lot of water boiling and it's just trapped there because the lid is so heavy. So this is what's going on in the body of a damp heat person. Now, don't let the title fool you. It is called the acne trouble because there's a high tendency to develop acne when you have damp heat, especially acne that is in the form of red bumps with pus in them. And there will also be issues on the skin, like rashes, especially when the weather changes, or like very sensitive skin in general. And there will also be some kind of obstruction in the digestion system. So you'll have bloating, sticky stools, bad breath, or a bad taste in the mouth. And because it's a heat symptom, the person would tend to feel warm or heavy most of the time. And how you can regulate this is by eating less greasy food, less damp foods, and more bitter. And also, like in the previous one, you want to avoid hot and humid weather. Now we're looking at blood stasis or blood stagnation. And this is someone who will be kind of low on energy, the blood is not flowing enough. So you could have bruises that form easily, skin that doesn't heal fast enough. This person could be impatient and short-tempered. And when we're looking at other symptoms, you're looking at a dull complexion. There's a lot of like dark colors associated here, right? So we have the dark under the eyes. There could also be dark or purplish lips or tongue. And then the period would tend to have a lot of blood clots. And so, as you can see, this is someone that is kind of like drained. And it comes from having a long-term deficiency, or like, for example, following a wrong diet for a long time, or being overworked for a very long time. And so you can call this like the office syndrome. And the best way to deal with that is to, well, definitely get more sunshine and move a lot, but also to focus on foods that are bitter, salty, and pungent, because the bitter will help with the yin in general. It's good for the blood, it's good for your to reduce dampness. The salty will help things move, and the pungent will also help things move, but in a different way, and it's slightly more, it'll just give you more energy. So it's a nice mix of yin and yang foods. Then similar to blood stagnation, here we have qi stagnation. And as I said earlier, they tend to go hand in hand. This one is called the moody one because that person would sigh frequently, have like, they feel like something is stuck in their throat and maybe are a bit shy or unable to communicate, not dealing with stress very well. And of course, this comes from a long period of stress. They will feel bloated, most likely, and feeling down in general. So this can also be a result of someone who has gone through a physical or emotional trauma. And one of the best ways to revive this is to help the spleen and the liver. So we're going to be looking at sweet foods, complex carbs, the good carbs, and sour foods like citrus and vinegar. And it's important to avoid caffeine because caffeine is like a quick hit, but it's not a real solution. It's not tackling the root cause. So, as you know, if you want to handle the root cause, you have to change your lifestyle and eating habits. And last but not least, we have the special one. So this is a modern constitution. It's called the extremely sensitive one. So there tends to be a lot of allergies there, a lot of things that may or may not be explained through Western medicine, or at least not yet. And there will be things like intense congestion, and like sneezing and runny nose, rashes that are very itchy and can come from things like clothing even. There will also be allergies to things in the air, and when things change, so like when seasons change or when the person goes somewhere new or travels, there could be a lot of disruption there and symptoms that get worse because of that. And one of the main traits that these people have is that they don't deal with gluten and dairy properly, but also things like onions and garlic can be very disturbing. So better to stay away from these and maybe introduce them slowly or try different forms, because as you remember, we're not considering food groups, like we can consider all the items of a food group equally, because the way we cook them and the way they're processed makes a big difference. So just to give a quick example, like yogurt might be okay for this person, but milk and ice cream would be hell. So of course we want to nourish the spleen through a lot of roots, avoiding anything sweet or greasy, and also to keep the air that they're breathing well ventilated and clean. So definitely avoid indoor spaces for too long unless they're well ventilated. All right, that sums it up. So those were the 9 constitutions. You probably felt like one or two resembled you the most. And if you have any doubts, you can talk to me about that. You can also take a quiz that I'll be sending you just so that you have a third party judgment. But definitely refer to me if you have any questions. And then I'll ask you to share on the group, where did you think you went wrong based on your constitution? So what mistakes have you been doing chronically or recently that are actually harming your constitution. And once we have things clear, I would like you to draft your ideal meal plan, given all this information that you've received today and the past weeks, and to create a menu that you can follow for 3 days with a decent amount of variety. You don't even need that much variety, but just as long as you have most food groups in there and also the cooking methods that would suit you, and then you can send that to me. I will approve them and then we can share them with each other. So thank you for listening and have a wonderful week ahead.